So this is somewhere in the East Bay, our new 24/7 live-work art space. Unlike our previous spaces, it is right next door to other 24/7 live-work art spaces. And it's actually zoned, apparently, to allow shipping containers. So fingers crossed, we've been here 4 or 5 months and no issues with the city yet. So basically it's 21,000 square feet, the pro of which is it's giant, 1, and 2, it's, how's it going? It's inside, so we don't have to worry about like neighbors complaining about shipping containers because they can't tell either way. This is a buddy who's a construction manager. He actually found us online. He got here like 2-3 months ago. You can see he's cut out the whole side and he's framed it. This is a parachute he's using to cover the side. There's a lot of work in progress. Hey, Scott. I don't even know if this open. Oh, looks like this is zip-locked. Oh, wow. You can tell he like knows what he's doing because it's actually laid out nicely and organized. He's got pretty elaborate plans for it. I know this one's going to be a big window. It's going to be cool to see how it ends up. So a lot of people have just figured out to do little pop-up things, like either tents or cordoned off small areas next to their container so that they have space for their things as they work on the build-out. Yeah, this is gonna studio apartment. Pretty much.
So people are living here?
It's a 24/7 art space, and I'm so busy with other stuff, I just don't really know. Someone falls asleep, you know, their mom can check on them. That's not my job. I mean, we don't have any facilities that the big software companies lack at their offices. Yeah. This is our friend Sean's section. He's a little messier. He's basically like trying to be doing outdoor trips like every weekend. So he's had very limited time to work on this, but his partner is a designer and has helped figure out how to make the interior look really good. What they did was they really wanted wood on the interior. They didn't want to spend like a ton on fancy Baltic 3/4 inch plywood. So what they did was just cheap oriented strand board and then fence, I think it's cedar, over it, and then coloring some of them differently, staining some of them differently than others. So now they've got like super solid walls. They were able to just staple these in with a nail gun, and they've got now the equivalent of like inch thick walls for a lot less than it would have cost to go with like 1 layer of nice plywood, and it looks cooler. This is our friend Gabriel's. He's planning a little more than Sean did. Sean kind of just cut out a wall with not much of a plan. Gabriel's like taking the time to put some tape on things and like think through how it feels to be in it before just randomly cutting out her entire wall. Steel dropped. Containers are down from 2,300 to 2,000. So it's literally they're selling for slightly more than the value of the metal in them. It's crazy.
Wow.
And they're like, I mean, you can see the stamp on that one, like maximum weight net that you can put in that. This thing is rated to hold 62,790 pounds and still be stacked 8 high on a ship in hurricanes. It's crazy. Like, they're great building block Legos, like super overbuilt. You can make 50 different mistakes and it's still way more structurally sound than, you know, the stick frame houses that people painfully construct.
This is our friend Crystal's house.
She's an engineer at a big tech company, and as she was building this, grizzled old men would just walk by and be like, it's not gonna work if you do this, it's not gonna work if you do this, it's not gonna work if you do this. She was like, okay, thanks. And then she basically just ignored them and built an awesome house.
How many structures are there being built right now?
1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 14-ish.
All types. This place is like a menagerie.
Tiny house playground.
Did you see it as that?
Pretty much. I mean, it also has coincidentally is the cheapest place to have a 24/7 art space that one can find anywhere near here. Cheapest place you can build and be around 24/7. This is our friends Danny and Vlad are doing this one. And has ended up being about the same size and shape. We make a little fun of them because it's taking them a lot longer and they're spending substantially more. But yeah, they wanted to build from scratch, so they got like raw metal and wood and adapted some plans they found. It's coming along. Oh, I didn't even realize they'd put a bed in. I think like everybody kind of wants to build here, and then, you know, whether it lasts a year or 5 years or whatever. We have a 3-year lease on this place, so theoretically we will actually be around for 3 years, although we'll keep them easily movable just in case. Quiet. It's been an interesting year.
Wow.
I guess last time was what, year and a half ago that I saw you guys?
Last summer.
What is this?
This was just on Craigslist. It's around half an acre. We were tired of paying rent in the Mission, so for less than our rent on an old 2-bedroom, we rented this whole half acre and kind of lightly tested the landlord ahead of time. We're like, we're just going to build small houses here. So basically, after you interviewed us last time on that lot, the city kind of decided they didn't like the idea of people living on vacant lots. What do you want? After a meeting with the city and a threat of a $1,100 a day fine to our landlord / us, we basically were informed by the city that to even so much as park a sedan on that lot, we'd have to file $3,800 fee to do some plan with the city on the huge crime of having 24/7 art spaces in shipping containers off-grid on vacant land. I gotta show you this, it's too funny. Most people live in houses designed for imaginary nuclear families or even earlier because there are giant barriers to individuals innovating in housing. $5,743.50. They seem to be very persistent in issuing this fine to us. They printed out press articles about us, a still from the video that we did there.
Oh my God.
We need to change those barriers legislatively, but we also need to not just wait for that. We need to practically make them irrelevant, like we have with, I don't know, the fact that it's illegal to have, what, more than 3 unrelated people living in a house without it being, in most states, a brothel or something like that. The fact that it's illegal to rent out spare bedrooms. We're ignoring more and more of these housing laws. We just need to kind of remove the teeth from some of the remaining ones. It was really scary when we rented this. It's like $9,100 a month. So I emptied out most of my bank account to put the month and a half down and the first month rent. And I realized that we would be losing $300 a day till we found people to fill it. We knew several of our friends would come and put in charge them like $600 a month each.
So you're saying it's zoned for shipping containers?
It's zoned for industrial, which is from like my 5 minutes of trying to read the code about it, means that like an example use is a machine shop. So you can do like welding, you can do painting, you can even do, I think, like mild car repairs. You just can't do particularly much of any of them. Like you can't have a production welding shop or a production woodworking shop. It's this weird thing, which I guess is probably a pretty good fit for containers, hopefully.
The couple who were building out this container, before they did anything to get their container, she built a bunch of paper models and scaled everything out.
Really putting time into it.
Well, they're putting time into planning compared to us. Or compared to the guy who just cut his whole side off. Compared to a normal house, they're still time into planning here is 2 weeks, and then people start making fun of you because you haven't started cutting holes in your container yet.
Do these people know a lot about construction, or are they getting tips from you, or how does this sort of,
I mean, it's kind of just like we've been. They're just kind of experimenting. And things overlap very well, like the plasma cutter that we bought for our projects a couple years ago, they can use. If you don't have an $800-ish plasma cutter, cutting windows is a huge pain in the ass. And if you have one, it's 10 minutes of work. It's no real substantial cost to let people use it. Like maybe it's $1 worth of consumables to cut a window. So yeah, having tools around helps. Having the right tools around helps a lot. As we've learned after having built our first several without the right tools around.
So this is the container I'm working on now. I had forfeited some extra space and put in wood studs and batting insulation. I switched from plywood to OSB and then mudded it just to get a kind of smoother wall finish. I did all the internal wiring and then I put a screw through it, so now I put a channel to rewire the house. That was like first time I've ever done electrical in my house. I like learned some important lessons. And then here's the bathroom. I just use like the shower. It's one piece, which is pretty easy to install. My fridge will be right here. My kitchen will be kind of here. I wanted to get like the maximum amount of space underneath the bed and wound up putting it too high up, so you can't really sit all the way up in bed. So underneath I have like a breaker box so that I can connect to trailer parks. And then I'm gonna build a desk by the window. And then there's a gap between this door and the back of the bathroom wall, so like that's where all the plumbing and the water and stuff will go. All of these screws, you can see they're fastened. We got these like gasketed metal screws. And it's super easy because you just use the other wall to kind of like jam it in, and you can put them all in yourself. And then the other thing we did was like, because of the way that the corrugate hits, what we should have done with all the perpendicular studs is that it's like still a ½ inch off. So I wound up shimming everything, and in the future I would just like rip all of these 2x4s down.
Still learning. I asked director of building for the city, how do you define like living somewhere? Because my friends who work at big tech companies, they're taking naps on Barca loungers, they've got walls of washers, they've got free food, and sometimes they're there all night, and sometimes they're asleep, and they have showers, gyms. Like, sounds a whole lot like a house to me. She just goes, it's a case-by-case basis. So this one is one that we converted for a friend of a friend, and basically it's just set up as a little workshop. We were able to do this in a little over 2 weeks with Heather and I working on it, and I think we charged him $5,000 for labor, and materials came to like $6,000. So this is what, with a shipping container, about $11,000 gets you.
But it's wired. You give it to him wired.
He basically wanted just like stuff to the door, so he's just using an extension cord now. He just wanted it set up like pretty bare bones, exposed wood.
Plywood?
Yeah, this is plywood, and then we did a really mild seal on it, and we used bamboo for the floor. So this one we did pretty much the same style as my container, where we used the closed cell foam and welded supports, because he wants to do like some immersive AV stuff in the back. He's like a film editor or something. I don't even see this. He added like a projector or something. He wanted no windows in the whole back section, so he just wanted one big window that opens here, and then the skylight opens as well.
He owns the whole thing?
Yeah.
Okay, you're not just renting the space out, you actually,
Right.
You can take this with him.
Mm-hmm. So
that's the concept, right?
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, we're kind of like just still experimenting with it. I think one on wheels will be one of the next things we do. There's an interesting law that may or may not pass in California about a right to sleep in cars. But if that passes, that could be interesting for some trailers parked on the street style container houses where we don't have to worry about renting space at all then.
Right now,
It helps when you have like 20,000 square feet of common space around you. We joke that we have the biggest tiny house in the world because it's like, you know, you can have a party with 200 people here and it is still quiet in most of this space. It's like all day, there's 20, 30, I can't even tell how many people there are here. I was worried subdividing it to like 30 or 40 people with access. That seemed like a lot of people to share a space, like it would just kind of turn into a mess. But you can't even tell people are here most of the time because it's so big and it's so divided. So yeah, we're not exactly making tons of sacrifices. This is very messy prototyping area. Several 3D printers, some plants that were highly rated for air filtering, peace lilies and snake plants to help keep the air a little cleaner up here. This is some wastewater from our laundry that normally I catch right by the laundry machine. I brought some of it up here and I'm experimenting with doing like a compost tea from it. So basically keeping air going to it to encourage aerobic rather than anaerobic bacterial growth. And the plants seem to like it so far. These burn when they get too much direct sunlight. I just figured out recently.
Beautiful place, huh?
Yeah.
That's a, New York Soho sort of feeling.
Yeah.
Is this common space?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then because like fire code apparently makes it hard to put in permanent walls, like you need to have ingress and egress or multiple ones or something to every room. Part of the condition is they have to leave a path through and can't like put in new walls or anything. We've been able to sublet. We've been able to make it work financially, frankly, because we can sublet like parts of hallways. Like as we walk through here, an artist friend rented this space. So then this is another friend's. This is like their more electronics-oriented prototyping area. So it's cool, like if we need an extra 10 soldering irons, they have us covered. What's funny is, from my very limited understanding of the zoning, we're basically allowed to do most things here, like most industrial processes. The one thing that you can't do is live. And some people's experiments aren't as far along. Is Michael here? Sometimes it looks a little like a dump in some spaces, but he'll figure it out, hopefully. San Francisco, they got interviewed about like people living in commercial spaces. And they said, look, the lady getting interviewed who worked for the city was an artist part-time when she wasn't doing like nuisance abatement or whatever they call it. She was like, look, it's really expensive to live in this city. So unless your neighbors are complaining about really loud parties over and over, we just kind of turn a blind eye to people living in commercial spaces. Fortunately, our neighbors here appear to also be 24/7 art spaces, which I think makes it a lot more sustainable for us to be the same.
So this is like common shower room, bathroom.
Yeah.
We've got 3 separate bathrooms. The shower in my container works as well, so 2 showers, 4 toilets, 3 or 4 sinks, or 5, I guess, with mine.
Are you plumbed?
Yeah, so what's cool is after spending a lot of time researching the best way to do it, I figured out we can just go like straight garden hose into this. And then we have on-demand hot water where when you turn this on, so that's propane now, we'll probably switch it out to something electric later on. Wait like 2 seconds and you have warm water. Not many sacrifices compared to a normal house, if any. Especially now with our giant common area. It's really tough to feel like there's much that we're missing. Another vacant lot that could be like 20 houses. So like for me, it's starting to make sense why you see these all over cities, even really expensive cities. Because it's not that, oh, this is vacant land that can be used. It's that you have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars in permits and then hundreds of thousands of dollars on additional construction. So it makes sense why a city or a region like here can simultaneously be so expensive, yet also have just these vacant lots all over the place. I mean, it makes sense why it would happen. It obviously, I don't think it makes sense to continue. So what you get is jumps. Like this was vacant for a long time, and now it's like this year-long build-out. It's gonna be this yuppie coffee thing. So you jump from nothing to like super expensive neighborhood thing with no intermediate use of the space at all. So after a long commute, this is our other site. What's up, dude? Dude, this looks so good.
Yeah.
You'll notice these parking spot lines all over here, like on this side and on this side. Basically what we did was right after we bought this, told a bunch of our friends, hey, you can park something here and like, you know, if it's an RV or whatever, that's fine. We won't ask many questions. So one parking spot would be a container or an RV, then one empty. Then the next would be a container RV. So we had like 12 set up within what, month and a half, 2 months of buying it. And it was, for a minute there, like covering the cost of the mortgage and like building a buffer to actually build better gardens and innovate more and fix this place up. And then like 1 or 2 neighbors complained, and the city informed us that for each of the lots in which we were in violation, which was both of these back 2, We cannot so much as park a car back here, even though there are parking spot lines painted, or if you don't do that within 30 days, pay us $1,100 per day. Not exactly what you would usually think it means to own a property. So now we have a really big, nice garden. So the plan now is to like someday eventually do something back here. One of the barriers is that if we want to have houses with toilets back here, we have to spend like 30 grand on each of these 2 parcels to put in a new sewage line, because composting toilets are illegal by the city's current interpretation. So that's like, you know, a nice $50,000 or $60,000 reason for us to like figure out how to change that asinine policy. The contrast is amazing. Like, we had serious threat of like $2,300 a day in fines. So then 2 or 3 months later, we do a soil test. Unsurprisingly, heavy lead contamination. The actual thing that the city should be really exerting some governmental control to do, which is keep kids from being poisoned by the soil in their neighborhood and the dust being generated by the metal foundries around here, they're doing nothing about, because money, I guess? Help yourself to berries. They're one of the things that don't accumulate lead from the soil. But the idea of people living in tiny houses affordably is, you know, spare no expense. This is my buddy Tim bought this in Boston, I think. It's like a prefab snap together thing. It's interesting. It's like super thick panels, and it's small enough that we're maybe allowed to somewhat keep it here as a shed. It varies city by city. In Oakland, you can have a shed up to 120 square feet without a permit. It's also unclear, to me at least, whether or not you can have more than 1 shed per parcel. So for now, we have 2 on 3 parcels. So the current plan is, you know, someday do something back here. This fence separates the front lot from the other 2, and then it's right down the middle, 1, 2, 3. Up here we have this warehouse as well. The little bit of code that we're learning about is so screwed up that if we do the paperwork and pay a bunch of money to convert that to live work, it ceases to count as a unit for our density calculation. If we convert that to live work, it no longer counts. We can do an additional 2 units up here, which is, to me, like, 1, the stupidest thing ever, and 2, just like, you know, proof point number 10,000 that code has no relation to reality or anybody's interest other than wealthy developers. Only here, by the way, because we're not in New Mexico. New Mexico is the only place that I know of where change to roles in one place, like if you get plans approved in Albuquerque, you can build in Taos off of them. They have state level building codes there, as opposed to California, where every city has different variants. New Mexico also has an alternative building code, meaning it's performance based. So you can build your wall out of mysterious material they've never heard of. And they're like, okay, does it fall down when we shake it like this? And other published quantitative standards. If it meets those, they're like, okay, like it is clearly quantifiably safe. You can build with it, as opposed to here and most other places where you have awesome things like spacing between 2x4s defined explicitly as part of the code. So we'll end up, you know, likely with what we eventually build here, doing stupid things like having structural spacing between the 2x4s and the walls of our metal box, just because code.
Well, there's also shipping containers are zoned as industrial materials, so they're not allowed to be on residential land.
It's unclear. It's very unclear like what we even have to do to get it to be considered a house rather than a container. The easy thing to do, one of our first thoughts was just to get this permitted as a trailer park, and then, you know, they're on wheels. Even according to building here, if it has a license plate on it, it's not a building department issue. It's DMV, and then like you have to park it somewhere where that's allowed. In Oakland, at least, you cannot store an RV unless it is within a metal structure.
Or it has to be fully enclosed.
Also, there are 0 legally permitted trailer parks in Oakland, so they just won't permit it. The city, they're like trying to figure out ways to help us. They're like, you can have distributed bedrooms. So tiny houses essentially has bedrooms. And then like, we'll have a center hub that has like kitchens and toilets or something. It'll be a pain in the ass, but like, fingers crossed, by end of next year, we'll have the first fully legal tiny house thing in Oakland. So this is, it's kind of a mess, but it's coming along slowly. Step one is to pay like somewhere between 50 and 150K among us to convert this into live work. That gives us the ability to be here 24/7. If we want this to be legal, we just have to write a check to somebody who has done plans like 30 different times, or 300, it'll be like 30 grand. And then like very quickly it will just get approved. Part of it is like our reluctance to pay someone else to do that. So now this is our latest stack. I just saw these today of papers. Okay, some minor permit thing, $3,382.34. That's a house. That's a container. And then, oh, I'm sorry, that was page one. Dude, look at this. This is a city zoning permits fee schedule. Subdivisions and parcel map waivers. Application for 1 to 4 lots, new condos and condo conversions. You are exempt, $6,500.
Well, no, but that's just to get the right zoning. Then you also have to submit applications for building permits.
I mean, literally,
Another...
we could build 10 units that live on the street for less than the cost of permits on this alone. For substantially less than the cost that we'll put in to permits alone here, let alone like if you think about like the 300 to 500K more, including the purchase of this, it'll be $1 million before we have this legal for 8 to 10 people to live here. We call this the horse trailer. Our friend has a finding used industrial materials problem, like addicted to it. It's like, my friend has this big trailer, you guys should buy it, it's 600 bucks. We ended up doing very little to it and then selling it to our friend. We financed it for her and it's another art space. How you doing, man?
Good.
Yeah, it'll make it really easy when we build a trailer because our neighbor has built 2 trailers already. So that'll save us a lot of time and mistakes.
Now let's put some insulation in.
There were days when there were like 15 people working on 5 different houses in the yard. And yeah, an old lady who lives next door complained about it. Frankly, whether that old lady likes it or not, this neighborhood's changing. And if we can piss off every old lady, we don't piss them all off, most of them love us. If we can piss off a couple old ladies in the neighborhood while the neighborhood is changing and result in the neighborhood being a somewhat defensible, financially sustainable alternative to the norm of gentrification, where artists create all the coolness to a neighborhood and then just get priced out while developers harvest the value that they created for themselves. If we can have the slightest chance of creating an alternative to that, even if it fails, like it's an adventure.